some of you might have realised, I'm not in fact Yvonne LaRue, who was advertised for this evening. Unfortunately, Yvonne wasn't able to make it due to exceptional circumstances. He would have loved to be here, but he sends his apologies. So that leaves me to fill his very big shoes. With these introductory remarks, I just wanted to look at the reasons why this directive was proposed in the first place, just to take that step backwards, and then to look at, how this informs what we should think of the debate and where this debate should go from now. The Commission has been involved in network and information security policy for a long time, way in excess of 10 years. And what we've seen, in fact, with this directive is a change in the approach that they've long maintained. So traditionally, when you think about the Commission in this space, they were always along the lines of working voluntarily with industry and with member states, taking a flexible approach, using instruments such as public-private partnerships. I mean, the EP3R is the classic one which you think of. Yet now what we've seen is this move across to hard legislation. So for me, the question which stands out is, why is that the case? And I think there's two real reasons for doing that. I think the first is the perception amongst many politicians and certainly in the media that security is getting worse and that industry either cannot or will not do anything towards improving it. I think the reality is somewhat more complex. What we're actually seeing is we're seeing a move where we see that the actors involved are getting more sophisticated, whether that be the criminals or whether it be nation-state actors as well, who are upping their offensive capabilities in cyber. And that's leading to more targeted attacks which are taking place. At the same time, the mass attacks of old are actually on the slide. So if you look at, for example, the data out of Kaspersky Labs, they pointed out that last year was a 5-year low in the amount of spam which is traveling across the networks. Likewise, Symantec pointed out that email phishing decreased last year. So for me, it's not so much of a case of security worsening, but in fact actually a changing threat landscape that we're having to deal with. The second reason that I think that the Commission put this proposal on the table relates to the recognition that security doesn't stop at national borders. So it's the feeling that, whether you look at the impact that a security incident can have, when you think about the actors who might be involved in such an incident, or even if you think about the methods of attack, think of botnets using zombie computers from all across the world, it's clear that national boundaries are meaningless. And I have the feeling, and perhaps the Commission would correct me, but this is my feeling, that the Commission got somewhat frustrated at the lack of European coordination in this space. They didn't feel that the Member States were naturally warming to using the EU as the natural vehicle for this, and that a lot of the moves were in fact bilateral, where they were thinking about international elements. So with those two elements, I think we can actually use them to help think about how the directive can still be improved, what things we can do to improve on the Commission's original proposal. When I think of the first one, which is the fact that the threat landscape is changing, I think what it means is that whether it's the businesses or indeed public administrations, they need to have that flexibility to be able to adapt and move with those changes, to react, keep up, to do the innovation which allows us to keep pace with the security. And as a result, that means that I think the provisions in the directive need to make sure that they're proportional and targeted. And I think then the natural impact of that when you look at the provisions is to think about the scope of the directive, what should be inside it and what should be outside. Now, as Pilar rightly pointed out, I think that certainly an industry committee who did a lot of work towards finding the right balance and making sure that we do have the right setup when it comes to the scope, with one minor exception which I'm going to come on to in a moment. But I think the first thing that strikes home for us is that if we're looking to make this proportional, we shouldn't include the so-called enablers of information society services within the scope. Essentially, if you take any of those as a single service and you cause disruption to it, it doesn't have a fundamental impact on the economy or society. And that for us is the key test for understanding whether it's important or not whether it's important, but whether it should be included or not. Likewise with hardware and software, which wasn't included by the Commission but has been part of the debate, we think it should be outside of the scope. And that's because we think if you include it in the scope, you're actually going to end up stifling innovation. And on top of that, you're going to interrupt an existing global methodology for product development and product assurance, which is the common criteria. Now, in the ITRE debate, this question around scope ended up focusing around whether to include cloud services which are used by other market operators, right, by the other critical infrastructure players. Now, our feeling was actually that they should not have been included, which is the one minor point where we think the industry vote could still have been improved. And the reason for that is, when it comes to these critical infrastructure players, when it comes to their mission critical services, they're actually likely to have those inside their own firewall, right? So they're probably going to be the ones which are managing them and handling their security. And even, by the way, if they did use it out in the public cloud, it's actually the critical operators or the market operators who are going to have the ability to see what the impact would be and what would happen in the case of an incident. So for us, yet again, we see that the natural home is with the operators themselves to take responsibility, not with the cloud providers. Now, the second lens, or the second concept we were talking about, why this directive was put on the table, related through to the global nature of cybersecurity. And here the natural impact should be to recognise the existing tools which are out there and make sure we don't, in creating European legislation, disrupt global approaches to cybersecurity which are effective. For us, there's two places where this impacts the directive. The first is in relation to the standards which the market operators are supposed to implement in order to meet their security measures. For us, there's a good set of existing international standards in this space, and we don't want regional or especially national standards to disrupt that situation. The second area is something which has been part of the debate, isn't part of the Commission's proposal, but is the question of the disclosure of vulnerabilities in hardware and software, where again we actually have a standard under development in ISO on this, as well as a scoring standard which is developed by FIRST, which helps us to prioritise which vulnerabilities there are. So we don't see the need for this to be brought into the directive. Now, I know I only had 5 minutes, so I'm not going to put more thoughts in your head, but I just want to conclude by thanking the Parliament for the good work it's done so far, congratulating Pilar on the excellent vote and the success in getting her report through yesterday, and just to ask you all to bear in mind these two filters, to think with these lenses when you look at how we can still improve this directive, because I think if we do, we can end up with a text that we're all proud of. Thank you.